Leading up to the 2016 presidential election, nearly every media outlet had polls projecting a victory for Hillary Clinton. The public absorbed these forecasts and treated the outcome as an absolute certainty. That collective confidence made the actual result a massive shock. Statistician Nate Silver bore the brunt of the public's anger. In his final forecast, he gave Clinton a 71% chance of winning, which meant he gave her opponent a 29%. Psychologists call this the description-experience gap. If you live through an event like 9/11, your fear of terrorism skyrockets. But the data reveals you are far more likely to be harmed by simply slipping and falling in your own shower. We struggle to accept these numbers because human brains are hardwired to see the world in absolute, black and white terms. We demand certainty, which leaves us entirely unequipped to navigate a reality governed by chance. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant proposed a thought experiment to expose this false confidence. He described a doctor who delivers a medical diagnosis. Based on his training and the available symptoms, the doctor states his conclusion as a simple, objective fact. Kant then changes the scenario. He asks what happens if the doctor is forced to bet his entire life savings on that exact diagnosis. Suddenly, with real stakes attached, the doctor hesitates. He becomes acutely aware of the margins of error and the possibility that he might be mistaken. Decades later, the mathematician John von Neumann expanded on this idea. He noted that everyday life is not like chess, where all the pieces are visible to both players. Instead, life is a game of incomplete information. There are variables only you know, variables only others know, and hidden factors no one sees. To survive in a world where we can never know all the variables, we have to stop operating on blind certainty. By treating our daily choices as literal, high-stakes poker bets, we force ourselves to rigorously evaluate the true probabilities of our decisions. At the poker table, amateurs often fall into a trap called playing scared. They back off when challenged and fold their cards at the first sign of aggression. Professionals take a different approach. They focus on picking their spots, meticulously waiting for the right moment and the right opponent to make their move. This graphic shows the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. Invented by pilot John Boyd, it's a mechanical process for systematically gathering intel. You can use this loop off the table too. When a writer receives a low-ball offer from an editor, the instinct might be to accept it immediately out of fear of losing the job. Instead, the writer can pause, reply with a vague statement about being busy, and simply observe the editor's reaction. In one real case, staying in the negotiation to observe the publisher's limits resulted in an exceptionally high rate of $3 a word. Forcefully delaying your response allows you to gather vital information about your opponent. Securing that extra data maximizes your mathematical edge before you finally place your bet. Even with perfect information, your betting strategy can fall apart if you lose control of your internal state. In poker, this is known as tilt. It happens when incidental, irrelevant emotions completely hijack a player's rational decision-making matrix. This does not mean emotions are bad. They are actually a vital component of risk assessment. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied patients with brain lesions that completely blocked their ability to experience emotion. Because they literally could not feel the psychological pain of losing money, these patients continuously made high-risk wagers until they went bankrupt. We need emotions, but we also need to keep them from clouding our judgment. In a famous study, psychologists called people to ask them to rate their overall life satisfaction. People experiencing sunny weather reported much higher satisfaction scores than those in the rain. But when the researchers explicitly asked, "How's the weather down there?" the effect vanished. Drawing attention to the weather instantly neutralized its subconscious impact on the participants' moods. Identifying the exact source of an emotion strips that emotion of its power. If a rude player at the table is making you angry, putting on headphones to block out their voice isolates the frustration. You acknowledge the feeling, dismiss it as irrelevant to the cards, and keep your mind objective for the next bet. The most dangerous phase of any bet isn't the initial wager, it's knowing when to walk away. Our ability to quit is routinely blocked by the planning fallacy. This cognitive bias occurs when we map out timelines using optimistic, best-case scenarios, ignoring the reality of the situation right in front of us. This chart shows the sunk cost fallacy in action. This occurs when humans irrationally cling to a failing job or a losing poker hand simply because of the resources they have already invested. The line plummets, but the resources keep piling on. Overcoming this requires mastering what poker players call the hero fold. This is the difficult realization that greatness isn't measured by the pots you win. Often, a championship career is defined by the terrible hands you choose not to play. Letting go of past investments is painful, but acknowledging that the landscape has shifted and changing your course based on new information is the ultimate demonstration of strategic adaptability. No matter how strategically adaptable you are, you will still encounter failure. In poker, there is a term called a bad beat. This is a frustrating scenario where a player makes all the right choices, holds the overwhelming statistical advantage, and still loses the hand purely due to bad luck. Venting about a bad beat feels entirely justified, but it forces the brain into a negative cycle of self-pity. While you are busy complaining about the last hand, your brain is literally blinded to the tactical opportunities emerging in the current one. Conversely, unearned success carries its own severe risks. In a classic study, Harvard psychologist Ellen Langer asked students to guess the outcome of a series of coin tosses. One group of students was fed a sequence where their correct guesses were heavily clustered at the very beginning of the experiment. When surveyed afterward, the students who experienced those early, random wins claimed they were naturally talented at the task. They had succumbed to the illusion of control, a cognitive bias where people genuinely believe they possess the skill to predict or influence an entirely random event. Whether you are crying over a bad beat or celebrating a lucky streak, obsessing over the final outcome destroys your objectivity. Outcomes are tied to chance, meaning the final result is entirely out of your control. The objective of a successful bettor is to completely decouple the decision-making process from the final result. You have to focus entirely on the mechanics of your choices, rather than the chips you win or lose. The scientist Louis Pasteur is famous for saying, "Chance favors the prepared mind," but people routinely ignore the critical first half of his quote. What he actually said was, "Where observation is concerned, chance favors only the prepared mind." Psychologist Richard Wiseman proved this with a simple newspaper experiment. He asked people to count the photographs in a paper. Self-described unlucky people took minutes to finish the task. Self-described lucky people finished in seconds. The lucky subjects succeeded because they noticed a massive block of text on the second page that explicitly said, "Stop counting. There are 43 photographs in this newspaper." The unlucky subjects completely missed it. We are not lucky because good things happen to us. We are lucky because our minds are actively trained to observe the opportunities right in front of us. You cannot control the cards you are dealt, but you always have total control over how you play the hand.